They'll be calling you a radical. I'm going to read this. This is from the transcript of the Megan Rice trial, the hearing, and any of you after you listen to this, I don't care, the hardest of the hardest, if this doesn't open your mind and change your life and change your world. As Paul wrote this, we're in the courtroom, is when that, you'll see that video of mine, when they walk out, that's him that I interview. Mary Evelyn Tucker, who I sat with at the potluck, her testimony in this is so overwhelming. Right after that, she, leans down, she's very tall, and I mean, wow. She hugged me and kissed me outside the courtroom. I gotta say, I've done a lot of things, and I want to talk about why I'm shooting this, for the record, how important this is, of where I'm shooting this. This is our family real estate and our ranch, 7th generation, Danish ancestors, first ones here, first one buried in the cemetery. I'm afraid to even point the camera that way. I want to do this on the Y12 sister spot. The other secret Manhattan evil project place is right behind my house. Right here. I've been chased out of there with helicopters since I was a boy. They're so evil that I don't even afraid to point the camera there anymore. That's what these monsters are doing to you. Clouded under secrecy. Evil. I'm going to read this. This changed my world forever, being there for those 2 days. And remember, Martin Luther King was killed nearby there. The North-South dynamic, the usury dynamic, every dynamic has ever come to a head right there in Knoxville. This is no different. It had to be there, and I experienced it at Y12. I'll read this. The sentencing hearing, Michael Wally, Greg, and I don't want to butcher his name because I have many times, Odin, and Megan Rice was interrupted by wintry weather. Some might say providentially. Judge Amul Thapar announced at 1:15 that the federal courthouse was closing at 2:30 p.m. because the accumulation of snow promised to make travel treacherous. After a brief consulting among the attorneys, it was decided they could not conclude the sentencing process by 2:30. So the judge suspended the hearing. It is currently scheduled to resume February 18th at 9 a.m. in Knoxville. I don't have my glasses, so bear with me. The powers that be are with me. The courtroom was full of supporters, and a second courtroom was pressed into service. That room filled, and there were reports of people sitting on the floor to view the proceedings on a big screen TV. Now, by the way, I have footage of all this. I have footage of a single filing standing there. We're there very early, and I want to make sure I say this, that Pete Seeger died that this morning. These are Pete Seeger's people. I mean, his intimate, closest. These are his people. I have footage of all of it. I have documentation of all of it. I have it. At 9 a.m., the hearing opened with Judge hearing arguments about the amount of restitution that would be required by Megan, Greg, and Michael. After hearing testimony from B&W, Y12 official, and he detailed cross-examination, the judge heard brief arguments, overruled all defense objections, and set restitution at $52,953. He waived interest since the defendants were not in a position to pay it off immediately. How much the final assessment might actually be has yet to be determined. No one in the courtroom could say certain whether the government had in fact reimbursed B&W, Y12, or Wackenhut for the items billed. If there was no reimbursement, the government cannot claim restitution from the TNP3. After a brief recess, court resumed with consideration of objections to the presentation reports. The judge quickly sustained the defense objections to use the word maliciously in the charge against Greg, Michael, and Megan. There was a detailed discussion of whether or not the defendants had accepted responsibility for their actions. As in the trial, legal language bears out scant resemblance to common usage of words. Accepting responsibility means pleading guilty and not putting the government in the trouble of a trial. Assistant District Attorney Jeff Theodore used the occasion to go on a mini rant about Ramsey Clark, from U.S. Attorney General who testified in the pre-trial motions hearing in April on this issue has no credibility, Theodore said, ignoring Ramsey's own testimony that he was the AG when the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was signed. He has represented just about every nefarious person out there. Theodore said, Nazi war criminal Saddam Hussein. He talked about war criminality at Y12. The judge cut him off, Francis Lewis Royce, to address the record, describing himself as a lawyer whose heroes included Clarence Darrow. He said no person should be faulted for taking their case. The judge tried to deflect Francis by interrupting Theodore's statement in a creatively favorable light. The judge then danced around Francis' assertions that Megan, Michael, and Greg, by submitting to assert and admitting the particulars of their case, amount to accepting responsibility. When you argue every element at every point, you're accepting responsibility. You're asking the court to put a square peg in a round hole. The judge found this metaphor compelling and repeated it later. I don't believe the defendants are contrite. Francis pointed out that in the history of law, it was only by repeatedly coming back to court with arguments again and again that bad law, Presley versus Ferguson, was overturned. I get it, said the judge. The judge eventually ruled that the TNP trio would not be given downward departures for acceptance of responsibility. In the ensuing decision about various cases and how they went into it, Judge Thapar in every instant chose the view most favorable to the prosecution, denying the defendants any benefit of the doubt and stepping in to help the prosecution when it stumbled. One issue raised by Greg Oden was whether or not a non-violent civil resistant action was outside the heartland of the sabotage law. The question is critical because critical courts have ruled that if the law was able outside the primary purpose intended by Congress, outside the heartland, the judge could take that into consideration at sentencing. Here's where it got surreal. The prosecution argued, and the judge agreed, that since these kinds of cases, anti-nuclear actions, are only kinds of cases where the law is being used at all, they must be in the heartland. Thapar said Congress and the Senate's guideline commission had plenty of time to change it if it doesn't like it. But in 2 of the 3 cases where the law was applied to anti-nuclear protesters, judges found a sentence that it was outside the heartland. What some go back and forth, the judge said he would not make a final decision at the moment, but would take it in during the discussion on reasons of variances. The final point argued was about the defendant's civil charitable public service, which can be taken into account. But it has to be truly exceptional, said the judge. Nothing from a billionaire to give millions to charity is not such a big deal. The fact that Michael, Greg, and Megan had devoted their entire lives to civil charitable public service did not seem to strike the judge as truly exceptional. But he allowed it, he could be taken up later under 3553A factors. It was 11:45 and Kathy Boland took the stand. It was established that she was a known Michael Wally for more than 20 years, sharing life space at the Dorothy Day Catholic Worker in D.C. for most of the time, where people are committed to looking at suffrage and the poor, to alternative the suffrage to eliminate violence and work for the peace. By the way, when I led the Million Masked Man March, you know I walked over to the Dorothy Day house. I have photographs over there. Chris Irwin, Michael's attorney, asked Kathy to tell the court who Dorothy Day was, and she provided a brief synopsis describing of Dorothy's coming to terms with poverty and suffering by working to change conditions that created poverty and suffering. Dorothy and Pete Marin wanted to change society to serve the ideas of the kingdom of God, said Kathy. And if Michael were released, would you be prepared to help him reintegrate into society, asked Chris. We'd like to do it immediately, Karen said instantly. Chris, is there anything else you'd like to tell the court? Kathy, Michael is a beloved member of our community and a servant to God. Every morning we walk down to the street to pray with our friends at the Ussie House. They sent a letter I would like to read. The letter explained that Michael joined in prayer every morning and that it was how they came to know him. He is an unwavering example of active nonviolence, generous kind, helping in many ways, whether it is to pick up litter or working in the garden. He is always willing to help others, especially those with special needs. Michael is a man of deep faith. He is a role model, a living example of the gospel. Chris, does he get paid? Kathy, we get a $20 stipe plus $10 for Metro. Kathy went on to describe Michael's 2013 Pax Christ Peacemaker Award and certified was entered into evidence. Kathy then told of one of the women who shares the house with them, a woman from Ethiopia who's working hard to learn English. One day she asked me, because she did not understand the word, what is generosity? The answer came to me immediately. I said, Michael Wally. And she then described in her broken English the many ways Michael serves the community. Kathy spoke also of a neighbor who, during a recent snowstorm, came up to the walk of the Dorothy Day house with a snow shovel. When he finished cleaning the walk, she said, I was just sitting inside watching the snow and thought of how many years Michael Ward shoveled my walk and other walks and up and down the block. And I thought I should repay that since he was in jail. Kathy described Michael as a teacher and a missionary for Jesus who commanded us all to put down the sword. He quoted Dorothy Day on the atomic bomb. If we wouldn't put people in gas chambers, why would we fling gas chambers at them? I've learned these things because Michael has said them so often, she said. She spoke of Martin Luther King, who condemned nuclear weapons in 1959 and declared that we face a choice between nonviolence and non-existence. She quoted the Second Vatican Council. Any act of war against cities is a crime against God and warrants universal condemnation. And Pope Paul VI, who described Hiroshima as a butchery of untold magnitude. In closing, Kathy drew the clear parallel between Michael Wally and the character Moshe Dibadil in the book The Night. In the book, Moshe is expelled from Hungary and goes to Poland, where he witnesses the deportation of the Jews. Returning to Hungary, he speaks to warn anyone of the coming down, but they won't listen. They thought him mad. They went to the gas chambers. We hope we have cut the fences off the camps to free the prisoners, Kathy said. I'm certain our Moshe, Michael Wally, would cut the fences in our world, our gas chambers, our nuclear weapons. They're ready for use. The whole world is concentrated camp, preparing for omnichemical weapons, unless we transform this reality. Michael is trying to serve our lives, your life, Judge Thapar, your life, Mr. Theodore, all of your lives. The courtroom was still for a minute. Jeff Theodore rose to cross-examine. Extraordinary information, Kathy, who gave it up easily. She said she has been a member of Plowshare's action group. Yes. She has engaged in protest. Yes. With these defendants. Yes. In action against nuclear submarines in Newport News. 5 times she volunteered to say. Theodore, the trouble. 5 times I have acted against these gas chambers without walls, he said. You don't believe what he did was wrong, do you? She answered, there is a higher law than the one in this court. There is the law of God. Theodore lowered the boom. If he were to come back to be reintegrated into your community, would you try to discourage him from doing this kind of action again? Kathy said she would not. Chris Irwin rose to the redirect, asking Kathy to describe the basis of the Plowshare movements and paraphrasing the Isaiah passage. We should always take a hammer to the chains that enslave people, she said. We have fashioned these weapons with our hands. We take them apart. No more questions, said Irwin. If Dr. Luton King Jr. was still alive and he came to the Dorothy Day Catholic Worker House, would you discourage him from committing civil disobedience? No, said Kathy. At 12:05, Mary Evelyn Tucker. I want to say this. I'll try to get through this. She hugged me and kissed me outside that courtroom. I sat in her there at the day. Changed my life forever. At 12:05, Mary Evelyn Tucker took the stand, and Francis Lloyd Walker walked her through the CV and through the relationship between her family and Megan's. How long have you known Megan Rice? He asked. Mary Evelyn leaned into the microphone. All my life, she said, with a mixture of love and pride. Would you describe her personality, Francis asked. Mary Evelyn, she believes deeply and clearly. She is far from disingenuous. When Prosecutor Theodore used that word, it hit my heart. She is a sincere person of conviction, compassion, and love. Her commitment to nonviolence, Gandhi, Mandela, Martin Luther King. There's a lineage of transformation. She has committed her life to the ways of seeking transformation. To allow Megan to continue the work of her life, the work to inevitably affiliated suffering outside the walls of a prison will be an invaluable gift to the world, said Mary Evelyn. To keep her inside the world would be diminished for lack of her work. Mary Evelyn then told the court that Megan has served as the caretaker in a large family, often accompanied the older generation in its final journey. With Aunt Megan by our side, said one niece, I can't think of any good purpose that would be served by keeping her in jail. Megan is in a giant lineage. Megan is in a great lineage. Gandhi preached nonviolence. King practiced nonviolence. Mandela proclaimed nonviolence, and Megan invoked nonviolence. Through her work, we can imagine a future of our children that we will not have to live under the strong shadow of nuclear peril. Surely we want to be the generation that stood up for all that of the life and the future of the planet. Jeff Theodore asked no questions. Andy Anderson, Duluth, Minnesota, veteran for peace, age 87, took the stand. Bill quickly began to ask him questions about his history. Careful about those memory questions, Andy cautioned. The courtroom chuckled. Apparently the easing of tension. I enlisted in the Navy in 1944, said Andy. I served on a destroyer in the Pacific. Our group came under fire from suicide planes and torpedoes. Our job was to go around reassuring sailors. I sat in the stern of the ship and held a friend in my arms when he died. No more violence. I came home a different person. I hope I am a different person ever since. Andy spoke of knowing Michael and Greg, of serving food to the homeless with Greg, and being on the street with Michael. They are terrific human beings, he said. If you were the judge, what do you think you would say? Asked Bill Quigley. What is a crime? If I had my way, forgive them their mistakes and it's gone. The only way to be able to help people is to be free. I would ask the judge to consider the release of Michael and Greg so they can continue to serve the community in the manner that they have been serving. Anything else? These aren't harmful people. They are decent, warm-hearted. Let them go. John LaForge was the last defendant. He told the court he knew Michael through the Catholic worker movement for 20 and 16 years, respectively. He talked of taking vegetables from the farm in Lac, Wisconsin, to the kitchens for the shelters in Duluth. He pointed out their work was unpaid. And how would you describe Michael Wally? Asked Bill Quigley. He is a quintessential Christian, said John. He speaks in biblical terms about the burden of the Bible places and us to do the right things. He will do it all. He is one of the using heroes of man of all tasks, going to do the ordinary work, changing beds, doing laundry, dishes. Quigley, would you describe him as disingenuous? LaForge, I was taken back in the courtroom when he said that. Maybe you quantify it. But there was a statement that they don't care about the law. For people who practice nonviolence, this kind of nonviolence, they care deeply about the law. So much of this is about the U.S. law. John also described a recent trip to Germany where he stood with the people there for a 2-week demonstration against the tornado jets that carry the U.S. B-61 nuclear bombs every day in Germany. He wants these bombs out of there. He said the people, the government, all the politician parties, but the United States is bringing these bombs back here to refurbish them here at Y-12 and then sending them back to Germany. Greg asked John to talk about his knowledge of the history of the bomb dropped in Hiroshima, and John replied by referring to the work of Gar Apovitz and Robert Lipton, who documented that Japan was using for terms of surrender in July 1940, and who linked the decision to drop the bomb to Russia's expected entry into the Pacific theater on August 8, 1945. After the bomb was dropped, said Greg, we accepted the terms offered by Japan, and then we were able to retain the emperor. Jeff Theodore attempted to discredit John by getting him to recount his arrest history, which John carefully did. You don't think there was anything wrong with what they did, do you? Asked Theodore. I might have done a few things differently, allowed John. If they were released, would you encourage them to do it again? Wouldn't you? Said Theodore, unmindful of the lawyer's distaste about asking questions you don't know the answer to. I'll refer to Phil Bergen, said John, who said you should always discourage each other from doing Plowshare's actions. If a person can be discouraged, they are not ready to do it. So you would try to prevent him, said Theodore? Argumentatively, yes, answered John. But would you support him if he did it? Of course. Greg asked John to describe his case. Before Judge Miles Lord, John explained to the judge, used the case to condemn nuclear weapons production and the companies that made them before sentencing John and the 6 months unsuspended probation. When John finished, the court took a 15-minute break. Returned at 1:15. The judge's announcement that the courthouse would be closed at 2:30 due to the snow. The lawyers consulted calendars, and the 18th of February came up the next day. All were free, so the sentencing hearing was suspended till then. And then that interview's with Paul. Paul wrote this. I've got to tell you, I heard lots of speeches. In the Plowshares, the greatest potluck in human history. I will never forget it. It changed my whole life forever. I met Dorothy Day, Megan Rice, in the Nevada test site. She was standing up for my father, the atomic nuke-to-death father. Lived right here. It's the most spiritual thing that ever happened to me. Oh yeah, all my money that is gone, everything that was taken, doesn't matter, I get it. It's the most powerful experience of my life. You see that interview with Paul, I do, then I walk over there and the first Roman ordained Catholic female priest, she wrote the answers, by the way, for the Kansas City group. I got to hear Greg and Michael's and Megan's pieces of theirs, what they're going to say. Hopefully they'll say it before the 18th or the 18th. It's overwhelming. These people are so pure. These people are so true. These people are standing for everything right. There's leukemia in my body. You know, the great Plowshares activist, with tears rolling down, he said, thank you, Kevin, I love you. And he put his hand and he says, bless you. I could feel it through my body. You know, I saw the worst and the best of Tennessee. It had to be there. Mary Evelyn told that judge how it was. Her wisdom is impeccable. Impeccable. And this story, in this place and time, you may not see it now, will be written for hundreds and hundreds of years. This is one of the most powerful stories in American history, in world history, unfolding. Megan Rice. January 28th, they gave the State of the Union. As I said, the State of the Union is Megan Rice. These people are true, they're just. They did not break the law. White 12 is breaking the law. Right here, they're breaking the law. Right here at West 12th Street, they're breaking the law. They're giving us what I have in my body, AML leukemia. I'll stay on this. This story means everything to me. Everything. Stay tuned.